after more than 100 years in Chicago, the Bears might become an Indiana team. Think about how insane that sounds for a second. This isn't some random startup moving offices across state lines. This is the Chicago Bears, one of the founding franchises of the NFL, a team tied to the identity of Chicago almost as much as deep dish pizza and the Butt Sears Tower. And now, Indiana politicians are openly trying to steal them. Not quietly either. They literally passed legislation designed to pull the Bears out of Illinois and into Hammond, Indiana. And here's where it gets political fast, because this whole thing became a real-world test of something Donald Trump has talked about for years. What happens when low-tech states start hunting big institutions from high-tech states? That's the real story here. Not football, money, power, and the beginning of a war between states that's about to get a lot uglier. A lot of people are going to look at this and go, who cares? It's just a stadium. No, it's not. Because what we're watching right now is basically corporate relocation. And wearing an NFL jersey, the Bears aren't just a football team anymore. Modern sports franchises are real estate empires. They're entertainment companies, tourism machines, tax generators. A new NFL stadium doesn't just mean football games. It means hotels, restaurants, concerts, casinos, apartment towers, convention, business, Super Bowls, billions flowing into one state instead of another. And this matters because Americans are already watching the same thing happen everywhere else. Companies leaving California, finance firms leaving New York, manufacturing leaving Illinois, people chasing lower taxes and cheaper living. Now even NFL teams are shopping states against each other. That should tell you something. And honestly, this story hits a nerve because people are exhausted. Housing costs are brutal. Groceries are up. Insurance keeps climbing. Meanwhile, billionaires want taxpayers to help fund a $4.7 billion stadium project. You can feel why regular people are angry. Chicago residents feel betrayed. Indiana residents feel like they're winning. And politicians, they're treating this like economic warfare. Because it is. To understand how we got here, you've got to go back a few years. The Bears have been unhappy with Soldier Field for a long time. And financially, you can understand why. Soldier Field is the smallest stadium in the NFL, around 61,500 seats. That limits everything. Super Bowls, big concerts, massive corporate events, premium luxury boxes. The Bears don't even fully control the stadium revenue streams the way newer NFL franchises do. And that's the key point. Mainstream coverage keeps dancing around. The modern NFL business model isn't really about football anymore. It's about owning the entire district around the stadium. That's where the real money is. The parking, the shopping, the hotels, the naming rights, the entertainment venues. That's why teams around America are building these giant mixed-use developments that look more like mini-cities than stadiums. The Bears wanted that too. So back in 2021, they made a huge move. They signed an agreement to buy Arlington Park in Arlington Heights, a massive 326-acre property. In 2023, they finalized the purchase for nearly $200 million, $197.2 million to be exact. At the time, people thought the deal was basically done. Everyone assumed the Bears were leaving downtown Chicago for the suburbs. But then things got messy. Property tax disputes started. Political fights started. Infrastructure fights started. And suddenly, the Bears realized something important. Illinois wasn't going to hand them everything they wanted. That's when the pressure campaign really began. In 2024, the Bears unveiled a gigantic new proposal near Soldier Field. Price tag $1. era 4,7 billion. And publicly, the messaging sounded careful. The team kept saying taxpayers wouldn't be funding the actual stadium itself. It sounds reasonable, right? Except there was a catch. Because reports later showed the Bears were asking for around $855 million in public infrastructure support. Roads, utilities, transit upgrades, public spending by another name. That's the part that made people furious, especially in a city already dealing with crime, debates, pension problems, budget stress, and rising living costs. And Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker basically looked at the proposal and said, nope. Reports described the plan as a non-starter. That's when Indiana smelled blood in the water. And honestly, you've got to admire the ruthlessness. Indiana politicians saw one of America's most iconic sports franchises frustrated with Illinois bureaucracy and thought, why not us? So they moved aggressively, very aggressively. By late 2025, the Bears publicly expanded their stadium search into Northwest Indiana. That changed everything, because now the threat felt real. Then came the bombshell. Indiana passed Senate Bill 27. This wasn't symbolic. This law literally created a framework to finance a Bears stadium in Hammond, Indiana. One chamber reportedly passed it 95-4. That's not normal bipartisan agreement. That's a state government basically screaming, bring us the Bears. And notice the language Indiana Republicans use while pitching this. Low taxes, business-friendly, fast approvals, less bureaucracy. Sound familiar? That's been Trump-style economic messaging for years. The argument that blue states overtax, overregulate, and eventually push investment away. Now, whether you agree with that or not, this bear story became a giant real-world example of people could actually see happening. And here's the craziest part. The Bears themselves started narrowing options down. Not Chicago, not 10 different locations, just 2, Arlington Heights or Hammond, Indiana. That's it. Imagine telling Chicago fans 10 years ago that the Chicago Bears might literally become an Indiana team. People would have laughed at you. Now, it's completely believable, and the emotional side of this is huge, because the Bears have played in Chicago since 1920, over a century. Generations of families built traditions around this team. You're talking about one of the deepest sports identities in America. So when people hear Indiana Bears, it feels wrong, like something breaking. And honestly, that emotional reaction is exactly why this story matters so much beyond sports, because it feels symbolic, like another example of an old major American city losing leverage, losing control, losing confidence. That's the real tension underneath all this. Once Indiana officially entered the race, the reactions got intense fast. Kevin Warren, the Bears CEO, started publicly talking about the need for a world-class stadium. That phrase matters, because in billionaire speak, world-class usually means we want complete control over the money. He also warned that uncertainty has consequences, and that line felt less like a comment and more like a threat. Basically, give us what we want or another state will. Then you had Indiana Governor Mike Braun openly cheering the move. After signing the legislation, he reportedly said, let's get this across the goal line. That's not subtle. That's a governor publicly trying to poach another state's cultural institution. Imagine if Texas tried stealing the Yankees from New York. That's the scale of what this feels like in the Midwest. And meanwhile, Chicago politicians suddenly realized this wasn't bluffing anymore. Mayor Brandon Johnson started publicly insisting they were still fighting to keep the Bears in Chicago. But here's the problem. Once another state enters the bidding war, taxpayers lose leverage almost immediately, because now the franchise has options, And this is where I think mainstream media coverage gets weirdly dishonest. They keep framing this like it's mostly about football tradition. No, it isn't. Right. This is negotiation warfare. The Bears are using relocation pressure the same way corporations use relocation pressure. It's the exact same playbook. Nice local economy you've got there. Shame if we moved it somewhere else. And people online are deeply divided over this. Some Chicago fans are furious at ownership. Others blame Illinois politicians. Others blame taxes. Others say taxpayers shouldn't fund billionaire projects at all. And honestly, everybody's got a point. Because there's truth on all sides here. Would a massive stadium district create jobs and investment? Probably. Could taxpayers get stuck subsidizing billionaires while regular people struggle? Also, yes, that's why this fight has become so politically explosive. It taps into every modern American frustration all at once. Housing pressure, public spending, urban decline fears, corporate power, state competition, identity politics, even class resentment. It's all sitting inside one football story. Here's what I think is really happening beneath the surface. The Bears are exposing something politicians don't want to admit. American states are no longer just competing for companies. They're competing for identity, for prestige, for population growth, for tax bases, for relevance. And sports franchises are now weapons in that competition. That's the deeper truth here. Because if Indiana successfully steals the Bears, it sends a brutal message. Nationally, it says even Chicago can lose. That matters a lot. And look at the pattern. We've already watched remote work weaken the grip big cities used to have. People realized they could earn money somewhere else, live somewhere cheaper, pay lower taxes. Now institutions are following the same logic. The Bears are basically behaving like a migrating corporation. And honestly, this probably won't stop with football. Wait until more states start aggressively targeting major events, headquarters, sports teams, film production, financial firms, tech campuses. This becomes a race. And once the race starts, politicians get desperate. That's why I think the most likely outcome is one of two things. Either the Bears actually move to Indiana, or Illinois eventually caves and gives massive concessions anyway. Because once a franchise proves it's willing to leave, the power balance changes permanently. And there's another angle nobody talks about enough. The Bears may not even care which state wins. Seriously, as long as they secure maximum revenue control and favorable terms, ownership probably views both outcomes as victories. That's why I keep saying this isn't really about football. Football is the emotional packaging. Real estate is the real business. That's the hidden engine driving everything. And honestly, Hammond, Indiana could benefit massively if this happens. Hotels, restaurants, construction jobs, national visibility, tourism revenue. You could see an entirely new economic zone emerge near Chicago's border. That's why Indiana lawmakers moved so fast. They're not chasing touchdowns, they're chasing billions. And this is where American viewers should really pay attention, because versions of this are happening everywhere now. States competing against each other, cities competing against suburbs, governments throwing incentives around, trying to hold on to investment. We're watching the same tensions play out in housing, too. People leaving expensive cities for lower-cost regions, businesses following population shifts, local governments panicking about shrinking tax bases. And the scary part, once momentum shifts away from a major city, it can become self-reinforcing. That's why this Bears story feels bigger than sports. It taps into a growing fear that some legacy cities are slowly losing their economic gravity. Now, that doesn't mean Chicago is collapsing tomorrow. Of course not. It's still one of America's great cities. But perception matters in economics. Confidence matters. Momentum matters. And if iconic institutions start leaving, even symbolically, people notice. Investors notice too. So the lesson here isn't football bad. The lesson is states that move faster and create better business conditions increasingly win these fights, whether people like that reality or not. What makes this story so fascinating isn't just that the Bears might leave Chicago, it's what that possibility says about America right now. A century-old institution is threatening to cross state lines because one government offered a better deal than another. That's the real headline, not football, competition. We're entering an era where states are fighting each other like corporations, and the winners are going to be the places that attract money, development, and people faster than everyone else. The scary part, once iconic institutions leave, they almost never come back. And if the Chicago Bears really become an Indiana team, people are going to look back at this moment as way more than a stadium fight. They'll see it as a warning sign. If you found this useful, the algorithm only shows this to people who subscribe. So hit subscribe, and I'll keep doing the research so you don't have to.